You will recall that when the budget, national budget framework and the appropriation bill was supported by Parliament, the two houses of Parliament, one of the key items was the ideal of achieving inclusive economic growth. In other words, the type of economic growth that produces employment, the type of economic growth that deals with inequalities as well as attacks poverty in our country. So today the ANC will just give you a reflection of the issues that are emanating from the meeting of the National Executive Committee. I am joined by the member of the NEC as well as the member of the Economic Transformation Committee of the National Executive Committee, who also is deployed in government in the capacity of Minister of Electricity, Comrade Kgosientsho Ramokgopa, who will outline that reflection, after which we are happy to have a very good conversation, quality conversation with yourselves, members of the media. Not so much of a Q&A, but more of a conversation. I will then invite Comrade Sputla to come through. Thank you very much. Comrade Sputla, can you use this one?
Good morning to everyone here present, and morning to the viewers at home. Maybe just to indicate the following, as part of, as Comrade Matlenge has indicated, the initial reflections on a very robust and in-depth discussion on the South African economy, and also answering the question, what is to be done to ensure that we are able to recover the South African economy. So maybe let me start by stating the following, that the National Executive Committee, that is the NEC of the African National Congress meeting, has engaged in in-depth discussions, having received reports on the state of the South African economy. These discussions were led by the NEC Subcommittee on Economic Transformation, drawing on technical presentations, political assessment, and social realities that shape our current economic context. The NEC approached these deliberations with a clear recognition that economic recovery and transformation remain urgent national priorities. Guided by the ANC's 2024 election manifesto and the resolutions of the 55th National Conference, the NEC's considerations were underpinned by the imperative to improve the lives of all South Africans, particularly the poor and the working class. The discussions unfolded against the backdrop of a sluggish global economy, persistent domestic inequality, and the challenge of restoring public confidence in the state's ability to deliver inclusive growth. The NEC discussions reaffirmed that a sustainable and transformative economic agenda must be people-centered, developmental in character, and rooted in the values of shared prosperity, solidarity, and justice. The NEC considered a comprehensive report on macroeconomic trends and sectoral performance, noting that economic growth remains below the levels required to reduce unemployment and poverty at scale. High youth unemployment, stagnant wages, and food insecurity continue to undermine social cohesion. Load shedding, though strides to resolve it have been registered, infrastructure bottlenecks and weak logistics systems constrain productivity and investor confidence. Fiscal pressures have intensified, requiring careful balancing of debt sustainability with developmental expenditure. Whilst inflation has moderated slightly, the cost of living remains high, with transport, food, and electricity costs disproportionately affecting the poor. The NEC discussions appreciated that these challenges demand a coherent and coordinated response from the state, working closely with all social partners. The NEC discussions focus on a set of immediate and medium-term interventions aimed at addressing economic stagnation whilst advancing structural transformation. Key considerations include, amongst others, the following. The first is to rebuild the productive economy. The NEC engagements reaffirm the centrality of industrialization, localization, and value chain development. It recognized the need to support labor-intensive sectors such as agriculture, manufacturing, and construction. It called for enhanced support to township and rural enterprises, cooperatives, and SMMEs as engines of inclusive growth. Secondly, the need to accelerate infrastructure investment. The NEC noted the slow pace of infrastructure rollout and urged for decisive action to unlock project pipelines, streamline procurement processes, and fast-track catalytic investments, particularly in the areas of energy, logistics, water, and sanitation. Infrastructure must serve both economic and social objectives. Thirdly, the need to promote employment and economic inclusion. Deliberations centered on the need for a renewed focus on employment creation. The NEC considered the fiscal position of the state and emphasized that fiscal consolidation must be accompanied by improved efficiency, anti-corruption efforts, and the shift towards outcome-based budgeting. It supported efforts to increase tax compliance and eliminate wasteful expenditure. Fifthly, ensuring a just energy transition. The ANC reaffirmed that South Africa's transition to a low-carbon economy must be just, equitable, and developmental. It cautioned against foreign-driven transitions that displace workers or undermine national sovereignty. Support for ESCOM's restructuring must go hand in hand with community participation and local industrial benefits. Number 6, transforming ownership and access to economic assets. The NEC stressed the importance of broad-based black economic empowerment, gender-responsive procurement, and land reform. Economic transformation must meaningfully change ownership patterns in favor of the historically excluded. Redistribution of land and support for emerging black farmers remains a critical policy focus. Number 7 of the immediate intervention is about restoring the role and capacity of the state. The meeting underscored the importance of a capable, ethical, and developmental state. Rebuilding public institutions, tackling poverty, and strengthening state-owned enterprises are prerequisites for sustained economic recovery. The role of the state must be proactive, not passive, in driving transformation. Again, the NEC makes the point that as a leader in the government of national unity, GNU in short, the deliberations affirm that economic transformation is grounded in principles of social justice, democratic accountability, and inclusive governance. The meeting emphasized that the ANC will engage constructively within the GNU to ensure that national priorities reflect the will and interests of the majority. It also engaged on the intensification of political oversight over the implementation of economic programs at all levels of government, including municipalities, and to strengthen coordination between ANC deployees and alliance partners. In conclusion, the NEC reaffirmed that the ANC remains committed to building a people's economy, an economy that prioritizes human dignity over profit, that uplifts and the marginalized, and that empowers communities to participate meaningfully in their own development. The NEC discussed the need for the Subcommittee on Economic Transformation to refine proposals into an integrated program of action which will be communicated to the public. The meeting further called on all South Africans, workers, business people, academics, youth, and rural communities to play an active role in rebuilding the economy. We remain guided by the principle that South Africa belongs to all who live in it, and that the fruits of our economy must be shared by all. Thanks, Jacob.
Thank you very much, Comrade Kgosientsho. I will at this point invite reactions, questions from yourselves, colleagues, members of the media. I am looking for hands. Let me go towards the left and be left-leaning. I will start with Sunday Times. Please go ahead, Kgothatso.
Thank you very much. Kgothatso Marisa here from Sunday Times. What is the ETC's position on the proposed inflation targeting of 3% by the Reserve Bank? There seems to be a bit of difference of opinion between Reserve Bank and the Minister of Finance. Maybe if you can clarify that. And then secondly, as far as the ETC is concerned, the future of the sitters, where should they be placed? Because we understand that there was a proposal that was presented by the Minister of Labour earlier this year, which sought to suggest that the sitters, because they are a skills-based function, should be placed in the Labour Department as opposed to the Higher Education Department. What is the ETC's position on that? And then maybe lastly, is it your understanding that the retaliatory tariffs are as a result of the country's BEE or triple BEE stance? Because we're starting to understand that, some of the issues that they would have raised in the US is that, they are not necessarily happy with our policy of the ANC and the country in terms of the BEE. That's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Madisa, Sunday Times. I will now move on to ENCA.
Thank you so much. My name is Moluku Mloto from ENCA. I just want to understand whether you have had to refine your approach given the recent developments in terms of the United States posture towards South Africa in terms of mitigating whatever is about to happen to us. But on the issue of legislative transformation, have you reflected on, in terms of to what extent you think black economic empowerment has stifled economic growth, job creation as a result, given the fact that as a policy, when it came into effect in 1994, I think unemployment was sitting at the time at around 20% or so. And in 2003, when it became a law, an act of government, it was at around 27%. Today, as we speak, we are well over 30%. Still on the black economic empowerment, how do you respond to the criticism that it has actually created an elite of politically connected individuals rather than what perhaps was the intention to encourage and to involve broader black people into the economic participation stream?
Thank you very much. As I recall that we call it broad-based black economic empowerment. I'll leave that to Comrade Sputler to reflect on that, but I think let's not miss the part about broad-based black economic empowerment. SABC.
My name is Kgosientsho. I'm with the SABC. I'm with the SABC. Listening to Dr. Ramokgopa's statement, it's like the ETC statement, it's painting a gloomy picture about the economy or the state of the economy. it doesn't really paint a rosy picture. But the question is, where did we go wrong? It's like we just started now in terms of governance. I mean, the ANC has just started to govern the country, the way he says things. I mean, and secondly, a broad-based black economic empowerment, or the black-based, I mean, black economic empowerment as it started, and now broad-based black economic empowerment today.
It's a tongue twister.
Yeah, no, it's a tongue twister. What happened? What happened? I mean, if you look at some of the contracts, I mean, some of the tenders, it seems black economic empowerment, or broad-based black economic empowerment, has now become like a swear word, where we've seen many things happening. We've seen the construction mafia in South Africa. It has become something that is delegitimized, an important interlocutor when it comes to the empowerment of black people, or people who were marginalized economically at some point. Where did we go wrong? And are you worried as the ETC that this scheme that was meant to empower black people has now been delegitimized and has become a swear word in South Africa, where you've got all the killings, all these construction mafias, the water tanker mafias now? Everything, it seems like it's just bad.
You done, Deborah?
I'm done.
All right. Thank you very much. Move on. I move on to. Sorry, I recognized my sister there at the back. I don't know if it's business day.
Yeah.
Just can't see clearly.
Yes,
please go ahead.
It's Tando Mayeko from Business Day. I just want to know whether ETC or the ANC has discussed the Reserve Bank's move to lower the inflation targeting band to 3%. The Finance Minister, Enoch Godongwana, has been on record saying that he still needs to have political backing before actually supporting a lower inflation targeting. I just want to know the ANC's views regarding that. And then secondly, we've seen with the whole tariff saga from Trump, it seems like South Africa's most immediate neighbors in the SADC region have received lower tariffs range than South Africa. Do you think there's a chance of perhaps a regional response to the tariffs, or is it because South Africa has a higher tariff rate than the other SADC countries, it makes it more difficult? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm aiming for just one round set of questions. And then if there really is a need for a follow-up, we can always do so, which is why, are you comfortable, Congress Butler?
Thank you.
Please go ahead.
Thank you. Shannon Merricks, Kasi Broadcasting Africa. You know, there's a saying, theory and practical. Theory, when you talk about the economy, it means something else. Practical is what we have here today. Practical, when I mean what we have here today, ANC had a venue in Joburg South, which was privately owned and so on, but now ANC is at a government-owned building, which we support as Kasi Broadcasting Africa, because now at this venue, practical, not theory, the ANC has booked the venue. The venue can be cleaned, the venue can be upgraded, a small business, broad-based black economic empowerment can take place, a small business can cater, a small business can provide security, the security guards can be insourced and so on. So don't the ANC think what happened this weekend should happen with all ANC NECs, because then you really do broad-based black economic empowerment. Then you really implement your economic policies. And not to go further, on the issue of the taxi industry, which is very important as well, what is the ANC doing to professionalize the taxi industry? Because it plays a major role. If you go to townships, those that don't know townships don't know that at Barra Mall, the number of traffic that's there, the number of people, but what is happening practical. Last but not least, the media industry. I can't sit here and not talk about the media industry. I'll be a sellout. The media industry in townships are lacking behind. The media industry in terms of online, we need Starlink and so on. What is the ANC doing as the leading party in the GNU to make sure small black-owned media enterprises prosper going forward as the economic cluster? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think this is a mouthful from yourselves, colleagues. I'm going to ask Comrade Sputler to react.
Forgot. Yeah.
Oh, Pravuyo.
I did say she can't.
Sorry, Newsroom Africa. Sorry, Pravuyo. You are very oblivious there at the back.
Well, it's because of our light. Yeah.
Oh my word! And we are we are eternally indebted to Newsroom Africa. That was a nice clap.
We keep the lights on.
Go ahead.
We keep the lights on.
Please go ahead, Pravuyo.
Okay. What I want to ask, essentially a question that has been asked by colleagues, is whether there was a focused conversation around specifically the tariffs and more generally about our trade and diplomatic relations with the United States of America. Whether the meeting deemed it necessary to have that, given what has been happening this week and the impact it's certainly going to have on the country. And then a second one was on the Reserve Bank governor hasn't sort of specifically said it or held the executive specifically responsible, but by implication, it's what he says, that while they are doing what they can on the monetary policy side with the blunt instruments that they have, but it has to be reciprocated now, or on the fiscal side, that's where there hasn't been, or there isn't, a great deal of movement. And I'm wondering whether there have been, again, on the back of the MPC's meeting a couple of days ago, this meeting didn't deem it fit or proper to actually discuss that, given the movement we are seeing certainly on the part of the Reserve Bank. Thanks.
All right. Thank you very much. Over to you, Comrade Sputler.
Thank you very much for the questions, and perhaps just to start from the end, just to Pravuyo's question, and a few colleagues have asked the same question in relation to the tariffs. There was a focused discussion, and I must add that it was both spirited and robust discussions. So the following are some of the elements of that conversation or discussion. First is that the United States remain our second biggest trading partner, and that we must do everything possible to preserve, if you like, that status, because it's got huge economic implications to South Africa. The most direct is in relation to the number of jobs that potentially could be lost as a result of these tariffs if our products that are earmarked for the U.S. are going to land uncompetitively, and they'll be displaced by products from other jurisdictions. So the point made there is that we must make everything possible within the bounds of rationality to ensure that we are able to preserve that relationship. I must indicate that the channels continues to be open between ourselves and the U.S. To ensure that we are able to find each other. Remember that Comrade Parks, in his official capacity as Minister of DTIC, has made the point that we have presented a framework for engagement. So if I isolated a number of areas where we think that we can have a mutually beneficial relationship between ourselves and the U.S., and that still continues to be a basis for discussion between us and the Americans. And something that must not be lost to us is that these tariffs are a unilateral action on the part of the Americans. And like President Ramaphosa had said, we will invest in ensuring that we are able to protect South African goods access to the American market. And then simultaneously we make the following point, that what this has done is to trigger a process of accelerating the diversification of South African goods, or rather markets for South African produced goods, so that we are able to de-risk, if you like, some degree of concentration in relation to one market. So we are doing simultaneously what both the Department of Agriculture, DTIC, and a number of departments are looking for additional markets to ensure that we de-risk ourselves from some degree of concentration. So the two are happening simultaneously. And maybe to Tando's question, because these tariffs are levied to sovereign jurisdictions, so it's very difficult to have a coordinated SADC response to the tariff imposition. If you come to think of it, a lot of countries are being subjected to these tariffs, and the point we made is that there's over 90 countries that are experiencing America's tariff imposition. So South Africa is not isolated as a result, as some may argue, of our policies in relation to BE expropriation. So South Africa has not been targeted and isolated as a country. There's over 90 countries that they are subjected to these tariffs, and some of them are historic and close allies to the US. So we don't really feel isolated, but like I said, we're going to do everything possible to address the question of the tariffs to ensure that we are able to minimize the damage as a result of the imposition of the tariffs. And then on the issues of inflation targeting, remember that the policy of government still remains the inflation target band of 3 to 6%. And of course, what the Reserve Bank has been doing historically since the introduction of that tariff band was to pursue a midpoint of 4.5%. And as the governor has made the point, although he's making a case for the possibility of the revising that inflation targeting to a ceiling of about 3%, it's a welcome conversation. I must say that we did not have sufficient time to conclude on that, because it's something that has become very topical recently, and the ETC never had an opportunity to discuss that in its completeness. But I must say that when we presented to plenary, we were able to put before plenary what are the pros and cons of going one route as opposed to the other. And then the NEC has assigned the ETC to have a much more deeper conversation and provide guidance on how best we can respond to these proposals. And ultimately, it will be the Minister of Finance, Comrade Enoch, who will make that determination. Of course, the ETC will make its contribution. So the long and short of it is that we have not resolved on this matter. But what remains policy is that target band of 3 to 6%, and we must still engage with what the pros and cons of going the route as proposed by the governor. But I must say that the conversation is welcomed. I mean, we will not stifle conversations and debates. The governor has got a particular approach, is able to substantiate why he thinks we must go that route, and he does make the observation that in fact that is a mandate of the policyholder, which is National Treasury in this instance, and that he'll be guided by the choices made by government and of course led by National Treasury. From an ANC perspective, those conversations continues to ensue. And then on the issues, Kgothatso, on the CETAs, of course, yes, you are absolutely correct that a proposal was presented before the ETC that took place sometime in January, and the substantiation there from Comrade Math was that this is really must be treated as part of ensuring that we get people into with the right skills, having benefited from investments by SETA to get them into employment, that it will make sense that the locus of the SETAs should be the Department of Employment and Labor. So that's a proposal that was put before us, but we chose that the conversation should be on the substance. What is it that needs to be done to ensure that we are able to bolster first the output of the SETAs and ensuring that there is no leakage in relation to how we are going to deploy the resources that we have. You can say that in some instances there's a misalignment between some of the training programs and what the economy requires. And we have taken the view that we are going to spend a lot of time in ensuring that we align what the SETAs are doing and what are the requirements of the economy going into the future. So, Ntebo, you are absolutely correct. So, the majority of the discussion in the ETC and by the NEC, what we tabled before the NEC, was that we are faced with an economy that is not performing. And we are able to illustrate that longitudinally over a period of time, there's been a substantial contraction of the South African economy, resulting in unemployment. And our view is that there's a number of factors that has led us to here, both exogenous and endogenous, or external factors and internal factors. But primarily it's issues around the capacity of the state to discharge and prosecute the programs that it sets for itself. I mean, let's take the gross fixed capital formation, which is a proxy for investment, the NDP, which is our preeminent document that articulates the South Africa that we want and sets a number of matrices that should be achieved across the socio-economic spectrum, advocates for an economy that should grow at 5.5% and goes further to make the point that the levels of investments in the South African economy should be at 30% of GDP. And we have seen that there's been a substantial decline over a period of time. As I speak to you, the levels of investments, that is gross fixed capital formation, is sitting at 14.5%. And a significant part of that is coming from the private sector. Very little is coming from the public sector. And part of the reasons have to do with the systemic weaknesses in public infrastructure delivery value chain. So there are significant weaknesses. We have hemorrhaged the technical and financial skills over a period of time, has undermined our ability to plan, has undermined our ability to invest in bankable projects. So you can see the quality of the projects that are coming out, a lot of them are not bankable. We are not able to clearly articulate what should constitute the implementation and rollout of those projects. And as a result, the public investment side of the gross fixed capital formation has underperformed. Although the president has announced 1 trillion rands over the MTF, of course, is a major psychological mark. For the first time in the history of the democratic project, we are going to breach over 1 trillion rand in infrastructure investment. But for as long as we have not resolved, if you like, the systemic challenges, you are unlikely going to see a full and efficient spending of that money. So it's important that we must address the issues of the systemic weaknesses. And then the other one is investment in the skills in relation to bankable projects. So like I said, the quality of the projects that are coming out to the market are of such a nature that they are unable to attract private sector investment. So it's important that we must invest in that part of our work. And our own computation suggests that you need something in the order of magnitude of about 6 billion rands to ensure that you are able to take out quality projects. And then from the private sector point of view, we have agreed that You need to reduce the permitting and licensing period. Here I'm talking about the EIAs, the water use licenses, the ability of municipalities to do zoning, to allow for private sector investments to happen, budgeting for bulk infrastructure, because it's the responsibility of local authorities to enable these projects by providing for bulk infrastructure financing. Is that we need to find bespoke instruments that will allow private sector to use their own balance sheet to finance the bulk infrastructure and recover that money in the rates and taxes and the tariffs. And in this way, you are going to catalyze private sector investment. And then we have done self-criticism. We have accepted that the quality of the deployees, especially in municipalities, leaves a lot to be desired. So it's important that we must rethink how we deploy people to some of our major metros, secondary cities, local municipalities. They must be of such quality that they are able to the magnitude of the developmental challenges that are facing those subnational governments, but also have the capacity to have an ability to respond in relation to what ought to be done to address the issues of development in those areas. And then thirdly, we have accepted that the corruption has undermined our ability to grow the economy, the substantial leakage in the system, misdirection of funds, and we need to do everything possible to fight the scourge of corruption. And of course, you would have seen that the President has given, if you like, an update in relation to how we are addressing say findings of the Zondo commissions and some of the recommendations. We applaud that. And what the NEC says is that we must redouble our efforts to ensure that we are able to address the scourge of corruption. So the point I'm making is that there's a multiplicity of reasons that have contributed to an economy that is not performing, that is lackluster, and the NEC accept the agency of the moment, and that we must be a bit bolder, aggressive in the manner in which we are going to discharge this intervention so that we are able to recover as quickly as possible. The issue of black economic empowerment, first is to say the following, is a broad-based black economic empowerment. I think the part of broad is important. It remains the policy of government. And of course, as is the case with any other policy, there are moments of reflecting on the efficacy of that policy, how we are discharging that policy, and this is one of them. It remains a central pillar of our quest to ensure that we fundamentally alter the economic relations of society, and it's a major part of that work. But we do accept that there is a case for us to rethink how it's going to be implemented going into the future, but we are not about to abandon it. So I think that there are lessons over the period since it was introduced, and we do accept that there's some degree of tweaking, and some of it must be a substantial revisit on how it's going to be prosecuted. But as a policy, it remains the cornerstone of what we want to do. And of course, we do accept that over a period of time, as a result of the misinterpretation in other quarters of what BE means, broad-based black economic empowerment means, it has created opportunistic elements who go and disrupt projects. They want 30% of this because they want to participate as black people. We say that there's an orderly way of doing that. And in fact, the Department of Public Works and Infrastructure, stretching from the previous administration, has been able to provide a framework on participation by local communities of what it means to take a stake, 30% by local communities in projects that are happening in their spaces. So that discipline has been established. So it's important that we are able to distinguish a criminal element, a criminal enterprise that abuses what we mean by black economic empowerment, and the honest intentions of how we want to incorporate the participation of local communities and that minimum floor of 30% participation rate. So yes, in some instances, we have seen that as a result of what gets to be characterized as a construction mafia, that has undermined our momentum to execute the build program. And hence you are seeing in many quarters, spheres of government, there's money that is being returned to national government, to the fiscus, because it has not been spent as a result of, amongst others, the construction mafia that undermines the pace and the quality of delivery of the projects going into the future. And the question, I think, Merrick's on the taxi industry, you are absolutely correct, is a big part of the South African economy. So if you come to think of it, over 60% of daily commuting in this country is through the taxi industry. You know that we had introduced the recapitalization program, really was to replenish the assets, the rolling stock, if you like, the taxis. There must be of a certain quality. You are able to ensure the safety of users, the drivers and the passengers. Of course, we have not been able to record the successes that we want, and we know that Minister Chrissy is revising that. And then there's a whole issue of how you formalize them. And the taxi industry has made a very cogent argument to say they are not subsidized, and yet they are the mainstay of the South African economy. I mean, the point I made earlier on, 60%, over 60% of daily commuting is through taxis, and the remainder is buses and trains, and yet those other modes of transport are receiving government subsidy. It's a conversation that Minister Chris is having. So outside the issues of freight logistics, I think the issue of passenger movement is important. You have seen that from the train side. We have been able to open a number of corridors. Minister Chris has been doing that, and this is work in progress. And I'm sure that at the right time we'll be able to make that announcement. But yes, the long and short is that is a mainstay of the South African economy. And if you like, first generation of South African real business people have gone into the taxi industry. Of course, it has evolved over a period of time. What also underpins this conversation in the ETC is the need for us to incorporate the participation of small, medium enterprises in all their manifestations. Of course, you make a case for journalists, those who are in the print, media, and all of that. So we address that in its totality. So we make the point that some of the matrices that we are going to use to measure the degree to which we are experiencing or registering this qualitative transformation is the rate at which we are able to incorporate, formalize, and affirm small, medium enterprises. So it underpins all of the interventions that we are making, be it in the just energy transition, the work that Minister Chris is doing, the Black Industrialist program. It's important that we are able to incorporate them in that conversation. I think that we have attempted to address all of the questions.
Thank you very much, Comrade Sputler. That was comprehensive. I am going to now try and draw us to a close. I'll take the last set of hands. Clearly this conversation, Comrade Sputler, is quite provocative. I see so many. There's another forest of hands. I'll start with the NCA.
All right, thanks.
Is there a hand? Oh, no.
She's assisting.
Oh, she's holding for you. Okay, then I see Siamtanda. Can I check this side as well? Bravuyo. Let's in that particular order.
All right. Moloko again from ENCA. Minister, in terms of the lessons that you say you learned in regard to the implementation of the broad-based Black economic empowerment, do those lessons include accusations, particularly by organizations on the right, who are saying that it stifles economic growth? Second question relates to an update on the 100 billion rand transformation fund. Have you been briefed as to when government intends to roll it out, but also the practical ways, so that we don't get to a situation where we say at the end of its implementation we say we must learn this and that, in terms of ensuring that it is transparent and that it is corruption free. Lastly, I think in January your committee called on the National Treasury to give Transnet a once-off debt relief. And I'm aware that I think on Friday, your colleague, Minister Grisi, announced 48 billion rand. That's been approved. Is that how you had envisioned it as the committee? And do you think it's effective, or you think if the National Treasury had broken the bank and said the total relief is here, that perhaps could have been more effective?
All right, thank you. Samtanda?
Sis Mahlengi, I just have one question really. It's about, I'll bring Dr. Ramokgopa to the tariffs. The perception that your deployees in government may have failed to secure a deal like other nations in terms of securing a lower tariff. I appreciate that you said South Africa it's not isolated, we're not alone in this thing, but other nations were able to secure deals. Has the ANC reflected on whether or not your deployees in government did enough to I don't know, cushion businesses in this regard? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to take newsroom.
Yeah, yes, what Santana just said. Did the committee get... Oh, sorry. Vuya Mvoko, Newsroom Africa. Did the committee get a sort of detailed or briefing on what the sticking points are? Because much as you're saying, what this has done has been to trigger other conversations about other markets and so on. But we're still stuck with the United States of America right now. And everyone has made it clear to all and sundry from the president down that we need this relationship. So did you get a detailed briefing as to where the sticking points are? And were you able to make that determination as to whether our team did their utmost best? I'll qualify it and say under the circumstances. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm going to take it back to Comrade Sputler, but I just want to make a very short remark that South Africans are waking up to a very strong critique against broad-based black economic empowerment in the wake of the U.S. administration casting aspersions on that particular transformation legislation. It's not the only one. Employment Equity, Land Expropriation Act, quite a number of those. And of course, as you rightly say, organizations to the right in our country, well, let's call it by its name, right-wing formations in South Africa. And I think South Africans have got to ponder whether this is a useful conversation to dig deeper into on the basis of the fact that suddenly there's something wrong with BBBE, on the basis of the fact that it's been redlined by right-wing organizations in our country that have also gone all out to mobilize the world, particularly the U.S., around it. It's quite interesting. I would urge that members of the media do have that kind of a self-reflecting conversation about that, because sitting here, many of us are products of broad-based black economic empowerment in various disciplines, in various fields. I'm just going to leave it at that and would suggest that perhaps we could pursue this conversation. But I think South Africans have got to be alerted to the fact that the day BBBE became a problem was when the U.S. president flagged it among the laws that are wrong in South Africa, and it was when it was flagged by Solidarity and AfriForum. Otherwise, it did not become such a spirited conversation. Indeed, we must continue to look at that piece of legislation and the democratic dividend that comes with it. But I think it's interesting that that conversation becomes so urgent now that it has been flagged by those two players, both at a geopolitical level internationally as well as at a domestic level. I will leave the rest to Comrade Sputler.
Thanks, colleagues. Maybe just to reinforce what Comrade Matleng has indicated, the issue of economic growth and the prosecution of black economic empowerment, they are not incompatible. So we've been able to illustrate over a passage of time that you can achieve both. I have articulated at great length, what are some of the objective and subjective factors that has undermined growth in our country. And I have not mentioned broad-based black economic empowerment as one of those. Like any policy framework, I think from time to time, any responsible government will go back and revise its implementation, learning from, if you like, both the missteps and successes of its implementation. And the point I made earlier on is that it remains a principal anchor of the transformation agenda. So we are not about to relent on it. But yes, we'll have and continue to have conversations about the manner in which we are executing that program. And I also want to state that we want to make the point that as a sovereign nation state, we reserve the right to make our policy choices, having due regard of our domestic conditions. So I don't think that we will be prescribed from outside. We will appreciate what some of these sensitivities are. But when all is said and done is that as a sovereign nation, we reserve the right to determine what these policy choices are and live with those choices. And we don't think that broad-based black economic empowerment is one of those choices that requires substantial revision as something that undergates the transformation project. But from a perspective of how best it can be improved in relation to execution born from our period of implementation, I think it's something that the ETC continues to do, and also the NEC is in support of that. Moloko, on the 100 billion rand transformation fund, no, that still continues to be work in progress. The colleagues did flag some of the conversations that are happening. As you will know, that Minister Comrade Tau, in his capacity in government, continues to canvass a number of stakeholders on how it can be shaped, what can be, if you like, some of its outcomes, and how it can be the performance against those outcomes should be measured. It's a conversation that continues, and I'm sure at the right time it will be placed before us. But I think as the ETC, we are in support of that fund, so that there's a capital injection that supports the participation of black players, if you like, in the productive sectors of the economy. I mean, the point I made earlier on about the qualitative transformation of the ownership patterns in the country is a function of the kind of fiscal support, the injection that we are giving, the capital support rather, that the DFIs can provide in the form of the IDC, DBSA. Of course, government will determine where its locus is, but as a principle is something that is being supported, and the department at the right time will come out. So on the support given to Transnet, we think that there's a template, and that template has illustrated that with the necessary fiscal support, and that support coming with the conditions, we are able to turn around an ailing SOE into one that begins to give us the kind of results that are required. And that example, that template is Eskom. Remember that it received a fiscal injection of 252 billion staggered over multiple financial years, and then once it meets those conditions, that support then gets to be converted into equity. So there's a template there, and as a result of that fiscal injection at Eskom, you are able to invest in the maintenance, replenishment of your generation assets, and today we are seeing the results there. The projection is that Eskom is likely going to declare dividends. So you are beginning to see that there's a turnaround as a result of this support. So it is that template that gets to be exported to Transnet, and we are confident that Minister Kgosientsho and those that are at the helm of Transnet rather will deploy this judiciously in a manner that helps us to turn around the situation there. Remember that we need to get to over about 270 million tons that needs to be moved per annum to get to pre-COVID levels conditions. And now we're at about 252 million tons that is being moved. We're seeing gradual progress. Transnet does need the kind of support that National Treasury has provided. And yes, I mean, on the quantum is a different matter, but on the principle of fiscal support to resuscitate Transnet is something that we have supported, and we are grateful that the National Treasury has come to the party. And then on our ability to secure the deal. So remember that the person who championed these discussions with the United States is the president. When he went to the U.S. With a team of ministers and of course also other stakeholders in the South African economy to go and engage with our second biggest partner, that is the U.S., to really make the case that this is a relationship that has got benefits to both countries. So it's a symbiotic relationship. And I made the point earlier on that we didn't go empty-handed. We provided a comprehensive framework on how we can reset that relationship to the extent that it meets our own domestic requirements and also how we understood and interpreted what the expectations of the U.S. is. We presented before them. Minister Tau in his official capacity continues to engage. We are still to receive a response. So the rate at which we are able to resolve this is also a function of the response we are getting from the counterparty. So we have placed a proposal on the table. That proposal was restated here in the NEC, and it's something that the Minister Tau has also made public in the issues of the agricultural sector, the issues around us securing the molecules, or if you like, the gas, 180 petajoules per annum over a period of 10 years. We're able to showcase what the numbers are, what is the benefit to the South African economy, and what is the benefit to the U.S. We are yet to receive a response. So I must say that we are confident in the ability of the South African delegation, in this instance led by Minister Tau, to engage with the parties, his counterpart in the U.S. But like I said, I mean, we are still awaiting that response. The team has made what we think is a compelling, if you like, a framework before the Americans, and we'll wait for them to respond. We will invest in protecting this relationship. So I want to emphasize that, for objective and subjective reasons. I think it's in our interest that we do that. And I had made the point earlier on that simultaneously we are going to ensure that we look for alternative markets. I mean, it will be a height of folly to suggest to you that you can discover those markets tomorrow and land these products there tomorrow. It will be a height of folly. I mean, it's a function of the buying power, the size of the middle class in that jurisdiction, whether they've got the ability to consume what we place before them. So it's a whole range of issues, and also the issues of logistics and all of that. So it's not something that can be resolved almost immediately, but we are investing in resolving that as soon as possible. So it's a two-twinged conversation. It's around the preservation of the existing relationship and the possibility of growing those, and also diversifying, if you like, markets for South African produced products, so that we are able to de-risk ourselves from a threat going into the future that can undermine, if you like, our own sovereign interest in relation to market access. So no, if you were to ask me, and that's the view of the NEC, is that the team is doing everything possible in its power to resolve this question, and we have and want to affirm our confidence in that team led by Comrade Tau in his capacity as the Minister of DTIC. Thanks, Matthew.
Thank you very much, Comrade Sputler. I think we have now come to, I see some nodding in the room, that we have indeed come to the end of this interaction. Follow-up interviews, one-on-one interviews, that opportunity is available for all of us members of the media with Comrade Sputler and other designated communication messengers from our economic transformation subcommittee of the NEC. I would like to thank you for your audience and for your engagement this morning. We do have a similar engagement this afternoon, where we will be looking at the matters related to the state of the government of national unity, the reflections by the National Executive Committee that will give you a sense into the thinking that is emerging there, and the thoughts and views and recommendations from the NEC of the ANC about how we are navigating issues of ensuring that South Africa has stability and governance, and securing the constitutionalism that we have to secure under these conditions, and some of the things that we ourselves are going to be critical of in as far as that matter is concerned. And so I'd like to prime you for that one, members of the media. But for this one, we are done. Thank you very much. Tea and coffee is served as always.